In this video, we are going to talk about invitational rhetoric. I chose to include information about invitational rhetoric because the invitational perspective asks individuals to really think about interactions in ways that are advantageous for fostering healthy and effective intercultural relationships and intercultural interactions. Before we talk about what invitational rhetoric is, however, we need to talk about traditional rhetoric, or rhetoric as persuasion. The invitational perspective was created because its authors, Foss and Griffin, believed that individuals sometimes entered into interactions with the goal of understanding one another rather than trying to change the other person's point of view. So, Foss and Griffin didn't create a new way of communicating. Rather, they gave a name to and fully described communication patterns that differed from the ones that are valued in contemporary communication theory. The valued perspective was, and still is, rhetoric as persuasion. Rhetoric as persuasion is the conscious attempt to change other people. When we utilize persuasive strategies in our communication, we're more concerned with getting our audience to do the things that we want them to do than with forging connections with our audience and trying to understand the points of view that the individuals in our audience possess. In other words, when we use traditional persuasive strategies, we're more concerned with winning than building and fostering strong relationships. This is because persuasion and persuasive strategies assume that there's a need for change and that individuals can utilize communicative strategies to get members of an audience to accept and believe the things that they're advocating for. If audience members entertain the arguments that the speaker presents, then the speaker technically has power, control, and domination over the audience. Power, control, and domination are strong words, and at times the persuasive strategies that people use to get individuals to adopt their point of view might be forceful or malicious. Other times, however, the power and control we have over people might seem almost innocuous. Take, for example, the case of two college students. These students are talking at the end of the semester, and one student tells the other that she really enjoyed her intercultural communication course. She then suggests that her friend ought to consider taking the class too. If her friend decides to take the class, her ideas and assumptions concerning what courses are good and what courses he ought to take influenced his world and his actions. While she likely didn't offer up her opinions about the class in an effort to control her friend, she still had control over him in that context and at that point in time. When he starts the class and thanks her for suggesting the course, because it really is a great course, she will likely experience the rush of power that's associated with knowing that she was able to influence another. She inspired him to take a particular course of action, and now he's appreciative of being given that suggestion. In that example, we can see that she had power over him because she was able to suggest classes that he ought to take. Do note, however, that by persuading him to give intercultural communication a try, she was also, to a degree, devaluing his lived experiences. She was saying, it doesn't matter if there are other classes you might want to take. I've taken this class, and I know you would want to take it too. While she might have had his best interest at heart, she's essentially saying that she knows better than he does what's best for him. It's in this way that we're able to see how patriarchy is associated with persuasion. The person with more knowledge, traditionally constructed as the father of the family, is able to force actions on others because of his, or in this case her, access to greater knowledge than the other individuals possess. The lived experiences of the young man in this example are seen as less valid because the only experience that's being valued is the experience of having taken the course in question. Invitational rhetoric, then, is an invitation to understanding as a means to create a relationship rooted in equality, immanent value, and self-determination. I'm not going to define these terms for you because the definitions are in the reading that you had for today. When a speaker chooses to engage an audience using invitational rhetoric, the speaker is inviting the audience to see the world as she does. As she presents her perspective, she needs to be careful so that she presents her point of view without devaluing the many other points of view that exist. While the speaker must carefully construct a message that invites others to understand her world as she does, her audience must also come to this interaction willing to listen so that they can fully understand her perspective. After her audience has come to experience the issue as she does, They are welcome to provide their experiences and their viewpoints. Through this dialogue, both the speaker and the audience come to understand the issue better as they learn to appreciate and value the experiences of the other. They accept the invitation to be equals in a conversation rather than perceiving the interaction as an opportunity to change the other person. When we invite others to interaction from the invitational perspective, we need to be sure that we do not assume that our experiences and perspectives are superior. We need to accept that the audience members are autonomous individuals who are capable of making choices that are right for them. And we need to attempt to experience the world as the other does so that we can come to know why they believe what they do. That being said, we engage in invitational rhetoric by offering perspectives and by creating external conditions that allow others to present their perspectives. When we offer perspectives, we tell the audience what we currently know or understand. The audience at this point has the duty of accepting our offering no matter what form it takes. In other words, the audience needs to accept that the speaker's position is unique and worthy of consideration. It's really important to remember that to be participating in an invitational dialogue, you need to accept that the other person's point of view is a valid one. Doing this poses a risk, as you might have to challenge some of your deeply held beliefs if you're going to fully accept that the other person's position is an appropriate and acceptable position. For example, consider a dialogue about gay rights between a gay man and an extremely conservative Christian. In order for these individuals to meet the requirements of the invitational form, they both have to come to the interaction willing to listen to the other and willing to accept that the other's point of view is valid. Doing this requires that the gay man accept the validity of a perspective that excludes him, and it requires that the conservative Christian accept the validity of a sexual orientation that she believes is morally wrong. As you might assume, doing this can be quite difficult. So it is important to remember that participating in invitational rhetoric isn't something that's easy to do. To quote Foss and Griffin, when people enter the interaction with the goal of not converting others to their position, but of sharing what they know, extending one another's ideas, thinking critically about all the ideas offered, and coming to an understanding of the subject and of one another, they are engaged in the process of offering. As I have already said, invitational rhetoric is an invitation to dialogue. So while it is important for the speaker to offer up his or her perspective, it's equally important for the speaker to create an environment where the audience feels comfortable doing the same. Invitational speakers can do this by creating the external conditions of safety, value, and freedom. Creating a condition of safety involves creating an environment where audience members do not feel that they're in danger for offering up their points of view. As a speaker, you can create a safe environment by making sure that you don't say things that will hurt, degrade, or belittle your audience members or their beliefs. By creating a safe environment, you enable the audience to trust you and the fact that you're working with them to cultivate a deeper understanding of the issue being discussed. Creating a condition of value requires the belief that the members of your audience have intrinsic worth. You can show that you value your audience members by accepting that they have a right to use their voices to enable their perspectives to be heard and understood. You can further show that you value your audience by accepting that every individual in your audience has an identity that they're free to choose. Sometimes through stereotyping processes, we ascribe identities to people or we give identities to people. For example, you force a minority identity on your only black friend when you ask her why she didn't participate in UWEC's protest march in early May. When we refrain from placing identities on others and allow them to choose which identity they want to display, we're showing that we value them as individuals and their autonomy to choose who they are. One final way you can show that you value the audience is by listening without interrupting. As you listen, you should attempt to think from the perspective that the audience is describing to you. In essence, you want to try and understand the world as they see it. You do this by practicing empathy. Empathy is attempting to understand where someone else is coming from. Creating a condition of freedom requires that you allow your audience members the power to choose. As participants in a dialogue, you give your audience members the freedom to choose any topic for discussion that they might want. Nothing is considered off limits. In the invitational frame, freedom to fully express one's point of view is possible because the goal of the interaction is a deeper understanding of the world and not acceptance of another's point of view. Thus, when you look to how you should frame your discussion posts, you want to make sure that you're always being accepting of the ideas that people are presenting, even if you disagree with them. And you don't necessarily want to be combative or very argumentative in what you're replying to those individuals. That doesn't mean that you can't critique what they're saying or question the things that they're saying, but you do want to be cautious of being overly aggressive in insinuating that the things that they're talking about are incorrect or not valid. I wanted to introduce you to the invitational perspective because for me it perfectly describes how we ought to communicate if we want to enhance intercultural relationships. When interactions are intercultural, there's a recognition that individuals are coming together from different cultures, and as such they have different values and different belief systems. Possessing different belief structures can cause conflict, but the invitational perspective really reminds us that we can accept the validity of another person's experiences and another person's beliefs without devaluing our own experiences and our own beliefs. So rather than staunchly holding to our own views, continuing conflict, and ultimately seeing our relationships fail, the invitational perspective reminds us that we can listen to and celebrate our differences while still holding on to those things that we value. As individuals of worth, we're allowed to choose the belief structures we want to adhere to. If we want to enable positive interactions, however, we have to be willing to afford others those same opportunities. While your textbook doesn't specifically talk about the invitational perspective, you might find it interesting to go back and reread the short section in Chapter 1 on building intercultural skills. That section is on pages 24 and 25. While the skills they describe are not exactly the same as the ones Foss and Griffin describe in the invitational form, there are many similarities between the type of communication your textbook authors and Foss and Griffin are advocating for. Please let me know if you have any questions, and you can do this by posting your questions to the D2L discussion forum about questions about lecture videos.